And we'll also take a look at another example that took a look at sexual behavior, specifically predatory behavior, or more specifically, the perception of sexual interest. So far in the Me Too movement, I believe there has been one high-profile case that has actually made it completed to trial, and that is Bill Cosby's case. But typically when you were hearing about issues with the Me Too movement or incidences in the Me Too movement, it was always very powerful males. So it was people like Harvey Weinstein, it was people like Kevin Spacey who were being accused, it was individuals like Bill Cosby. And people started to wonder, well, is this just some sort of toxic masculinity type situation that we have here? Is that why so much of this sexual aggression is occurring? And then interesting things started happening where women started to be accused. So Asia Argento was allegedly raped a child. There's no other way to put it. She allegedly raped a 17-year-old boy, and he came out and accused her, and people started to think, well, maybe it's not just males. Maybe it's not just a toxic masculinity. Maybe it is quite possible for women as well to be sexual predators. So a study looked at the perception of sexual interest and whether or not that's affected by the gender of the individual that is judging that interest. So we'll take a look at that as well. And again, it's a topic that cannot be assessed with the sort of simple pre-test, post-test designs we've encountered so far. If anybody has been following the Me Too movement, when people are accused in the Me Too movement, what do they usually defend themselves with? Does anybody know what somebody like Harvey Weinstein would say, or what somebody like Kevin Spacey might say? We're going to leave Bill Cosby out of this because Bill Cosby clearly, well, I'll mention that in just a little bit. But does anybody remember what these people typically say? What is a typical person who's sexually harassing another individual? When they get accused, what's their typical go-to excuse? Mm-hmm.
They thought that the other person was interested, that the other person wanted it, they perceived an interest in it.
So typically when sexual harassment occurs, it occurs because whoever did the harassing perceived sexual interest in the other individual, perceived that they wanted it, perceived that they were receptive to those advances, to that compliment. So it's very rare, I'm not saying it's completely unheard of, but it's very rare that people do this not thinking that the other person is interested. It's very rare that they do any sort of sexual harassment thinking, I'm doing this specifically to injure this person. Usually it's, you know what, I'm doing this to pursue some sort of sexual relation with this individual. And, you know, people like Harvey Weinstein will say, well, she was into it. She was interested. They'll say things like she was giving off all the signals, right? So that is something that's very interesting psychologically. Again, we'll leave Cosby out of it. Because why are we picking up those signals? Why are they misperceiving those signals? So they're clearly misperceiving it. That's what makes it partially sexual harassment. Sorry, that's partially what makes it sexual harassment. So let me rephrase that. It is sexual harassment, but part of what makes it sexual harassment is whether or not it's welcome. So is it because, again, why is it that they're doing this? Is it a misperception of sexual interest? And if so, why are they misperceiving sexual interest? Are they misperceiving sexual interest because that's the way males are brought up in our culture? Are males just continually told, of course they want it, sure they want it. When they say no, they mean yes. If they say no, that means yes. And the more they say no, the more interested they are, right? Is it something like that? Is it the way that men are trained in our society? Or does it have something to do with power? And if it has something to do with power, that means that we should expect powerful women also to start down a path of sexual harassment as well. So as more women become bosses, as more women get places of power, should we as psychologists expect more sexual harassment cases to occur, this time for subordinates of these female bosses. All right, so that's what the study here was taking a look at. So this is Kunstman and Maynard, and they had a staged manipulation. So we'll recap this before we go into what we think they might find. So they had a staged manipulation, and participants were told that they were going to make decisions with a partner on a task that was going to simulate decision-making in organizations. So it was basically like, okay, you guys are going to pretend that you're part of this business, and we're just going to see how you make your decisions in terms of the day-to-day operations of an organization. So that was a lie. This was a staged manipulation. That was not what it was about. The actual experiment was about biases and sexual interest. The actual experiment was about perceived sexual interest. So prior to interacting, so before they met their partners, they were given a 2-minute video of their opposite sex partner. So they were doing opposite sex partners, so this was for heterosexual relationships, and they would watch a 2-minute video of their partner. They would basically say, okay, well here, look at this monitor over here. This is the person you're going to be working with. We just taped this, just a little bit ago. So watch this person. Here's their 2-minute video. And they would watch a 2-minute video of their opposite sex partner, and then they would answer questions about that partner's sexual interest in them, their perceived sexual interest in the subject. So the participants were male or female, and they were always placed in opposite sex groups. So if you were male, you watched a female video. If you were female, you watched a male video. And that part was all staged. But then what happened is that they were placed in either a power position or an equal position. So prior to watching this video, prior to interacting, they were placed in either a power position or an equal position. And the way that was manipulated was as follows. There was points in this experiment for participating. So all of you have gone through this experience. You had that intro to, that general psychology part of that subject pool where you could earn participation points for completing experiments. In this situation, if you were in the power position, you were told that it was your decision at the end of the experiment how to split up the participation points. So they would say something like, well, there's 10 participation points for the both of you for participating in this experiment, and you are in a power position. So you're going to decide, do you want to split it 5 and 5? Do you want to split it 7 for yourself, 3 for the other person? Depending upon how they perform, do you want to take 9 for yourself and only give them 1? Whatever it is, you come up with that decision. That's the power position. The other half of the subjects were placed in an equal position, where they were told, oh, there's 10 points in total for participating in this experiment. You're going to get 5, and your partner's going to get 5. So they were put in that equal position. So the question is that going to affect their perceived interest? If you are in a power position, would that make you misperceive interest in a potential sexual partner? All right, so once again, we have subject sex, we got power condition. So we had male subjects that watched a staged female video. We had female subjects that watched the staged male video. And then these subjects here were either placed into a leader condition or they were placed in a condition where they were equals. So we have 2 levels for subject sex. We got 2 levels for power condition. So we have 4 separate conditions. We have males that were placed in the power condition. We have males that were placed in the equal condition. We have females that were placed in the power condition. And we have females that were placed in the equal condition. So they're placed in these conditions. They watched their video. And then they were asked the following types of questions. They filled out a survey and they said on a scale of, let's just go with 1 to 10. On a scale of 1 to 10, rate the truth of these statements. I could see this person having romantic or sexual feelings for me. So the person that you just watched in the video, you have to rate whether they would be interested in you. I could see this person wanting to ask me out on a date. So you have to rate the person that you saw in that video. How likely are they to want to ask you out on a date. Basically, how much sexual interest do you think that the person in the video would have in you? That's the question that they were asking, and they wanted to know, is that affected by whether you're a male or a female? Is that affected by whether you're a leader or an equal? And is it differently affected for leaders and equals if you're male versus if you're female? That's the question that they were looking at. All right, everybody clear on that setup and what they were measuring? All right, let's see what they found. So here is the basic matrix of these two conditions. So once again, were you in a leader position or were you in an equal position? And was it a male subject or was it a female subject that was judging the sexual interest of the person on the video? The dependent variable was a score of your expectation of sexual interest. So the higher the score, this is the ESI score, the higher the score, the more you thought that the person in the video was interested in you. The more you thought that they were receptive to your sexual interest, expectation of sexual interest, the more you thought that they would be open to your sexual attention. Independent variable A was the power condition. There was two levels. Were you placed in a power position as a leader or were you an equal? Independent variable B was subject sex. There was two levels. Were you a male subject or were you a female subject? And it was a 2x2 design, so we have all four combinations of those variables. All right, so let's take a look at power condition first. Leaders versus equals. The question is, was there a main effect of power condition? So in and of itself, does power over a person affect your expectation of sexual interest? If you have a position of authority over an individual, are you more likely to perceive them as being sexually interested in you, or are you less likely to see them as being sexually interested in you? So in our matrix of variables here, basically this main effect is saying that we are only interested in the difference between leaders and equals, and we're no longer interested in males versus females. So it's just people that are in a leadership position. Are they more likely or less likely to have expectations of sexual interest than people who are placed in an equal condition? Which one of those do we think is going to occur? All right, so there we go. So any thoughts, any predictions? What do we think is going to happen for this male effect? For this main effect. That was a Freudian slip. Mm-hmm.
I would think that the leaders will have more expectation of sexual interest than the equals. Because
Okay.
when you're a leader, like, you might think that the people below you will want something from you, and often a way to get those things would be in a sexual way.
Okay. So you would imagine that they would be looking to you for resources and basically looking for a trade. Like they would be more willing to trade sexual favors for your help in a certain endeavor. Okay. Not as crass as that, not like they're prostituting themselves, but more likely to be open to that possibility.
Yeah.
Okay, so higher expectations of sexual interest for people in power. Any other speculations? Does anybody predict the opposite occurrence? Okay, does anybody have any other theories about why power might increase your expectation of sexual interest, why power might increase your perception of what of how interested your subordinates are? Mm-hmm.
I think maybe like being in a leadership position puts you like it could like boost your confidence and feel like maybe you've earned your way there, and so other people would be interested in you.
Okay, so it might boost your confidence. So as a leader, you might have just greater confidence. The more confident you are, of course, the more you would imagine other people would find you impressive, right? That's almost the definition of confidence. If you're an unconfident person, you'd probably sit there thinking, why would anybody ever be interested in me? I'm not good at anything. So conversely, if you're a confident person, you might think to yourself, everybody's going to be interested in me because I'm amazing. So if power boosts your confidence, then it would boost your expectation of sexual interest in other individuals. All right. Any other speculations or ideas about what might be going on here? Mm-hmm.
Kind of along with that, if you're in a power position, you're not always used to people telling you no or saying no to you. So you could just assume that they're gonna say yes.
Okay. So that's another thing that might occur. You could be surrounded by yes people, right? So basically any idea of yours, you're going to think that they're going to be open to. So do you guys want to go to this restaurant? Yes, we do. What a great suggestion. Do you guys want to try this new project? Yes, we do. What a great suggestion. Do you want to go out with me on Friday night? Yes, we do. What a great suggestion. So if you're surrounded by people continually saying yes because you're in a position of power, then of course that's probably going to extend to all facets of life. So if you are wondering, would somebody be open to a sexual relationship with you, then if they're more likely to say yes in general, they're more likely to say yes to that as well. All right, so those are all really good possibilities. And very nicely, all of them just had to do with people. So it's very good that none of you in here were like, well, males might do this and females might do that. That's not what we're looking at here. So it's a really good sign that we understand our main effects, because we were just looking at people as leaders and people as equals. And what they found was that among equals, the expectation of sexual interest, when they scored this, higher scores mean greater expectations of sexual interest. Higher scores mean you perceived the person in the video would be more interested in you. When people were placed as in the equals position, they scored 2.44 on that scale. When they were placed in the leadership position, they scored 3.15. And that was a significant difference. That was a real difference. Not due to chance. This is the girl on the basketball team winning by 20-1, right? This is the girl on the basketball team winning 100 games in a row. People in a leadership position actually do perceive their subordinates as being more sexually interested in them. So if you're power over a person, does that affect your expectation of sexual interest? The answer is yes. Now, everybody here had a good kind of suggestion in terms of why that might be. The one in the paper that they had is a little, I think we have more hope for humanity in here than psychology sometimes shows that we should. So their leading theory about why this occurred is that the more power you have over somebody, the less you look at them as a human being, and the more you look at them as a tool that can help you attain your goals. So it's almost like the more power you have, the more dehumanizing people under you become. So, and the more that you use them to attain your own goals. So a boss doesn't look at necessarily their employees and say, I wonder how I'm going to make all of these people better. They look at their employees and say, I wonder how I can use them to make me better. I wonder how I can use them to make me more money, or make me more successful, or make my projects, better projects. They see them as tools. And if your goal is to make more money, you see your employees as tools that you can use to make more money. If your goal is to be more successful, you see your employees as tools to be more successful. If your goal is to gratify your own sexual urges, you unconsciously see your employees as tools to gratify your own sexual urges, and tools don't say no. Of course tools are interested. A hammer is very interested in hammering a nail. That's what it's there for. So the less you see people as humans and the more you see them as tools because you have power over them, the more you're able to misperceive sexual interest. So very importantly, these two groups watched the same videos. It was the exact same video. So all those stories that people say about, they were giving off the signals, they were showing interest. You should have seen the way they commented my jacket the other day. Of course they wanted it. They truly believe that. They honestly think that these people are sending them the signals because the same video caused these two numbers. And the only difference here is whether you were a leader or you were an equal. Leaders misperceive sexual interest. And that is why sensitivity training and other sort of empathic trainings are going to have a hard time tackling sexual harassment, because it's not insensitive to ask somebody out on a date if they're interested in you, right? It's not insensitive if you have somebody at a party and they're sitting there and they're thinking to themselves, oh my gosh, I hope he comes over here. Oh my goodness, I hope he asks me out. Oh, I've been crushing on him forever. And I've been sending out all the signals. I really hope he comes over here and asks me out. If you go over there and you say, hey, do you want to go out on Friday? That's great. That's amazing. That's awesome. That's super good for them. You don't need sensitivity training. Sensitivity training is not going to combat this. This is a perception problem, right? This is a basic human perceived bias. So this is why if we were applying this to the workforce, as psychologists, if you were walking into a situation, you would say, no harassment training, no sensitivity training, no training on how to read signals in a social situation. All of those are going to backfire because power is causing people to misperceive those cues. Power is causing people to misperceive those cues. So how do we get rid of sexual harassment? You put in rules that are according to power. You put in rules like bosses cannot date their subordinates. You put in rules that you cannot comment on people's, outfits. You put in those rules because you can't leave it to perception to decide whether it's okay or not, because leaders are going to continue to do that they're going to continue to misperceive it. So I remember when I was first starting to TA, we had a 1-hour seminar, training workshop on how to TA. And I thought we were going to go in there and learn how to supervise exams and learn how to use administrative systems and learn how to, do office hours and everything. 45 minutes of it was don't date your students. Literally, don't date your students for 45 minutes. Why? We were in positions of power. We were leaders. As little as that power is, right? It's not like we were masters of the universe. We were TAs, but we were in that position of power. They knew we would misperceive interest. They knew that we would say, oh, that student that I'm TAing, they seem very interested in me. They were giving me all, they knew. So they just put the rule in, don't trust your perceptions. You're not allowed to date them. And then we had another 10 minutes on what to do if you do date them. If you do the stupid thing and you break the rule, this is what you do. And then we had 5 minutes about how to set up office hours and things like that. All right, so psychology says just being a leader makes you more likely to perceive sexual interest in your subordinates. What about the effects of males versus females? What about those societal, maybe biological influences that we have in terms of these differences? Is there a main effect for males versus females? That is, do males have higher expectations of sexual interest than females do? Or is it maybe vice versa? Do females maybe have a higher expectation of sexual interest than males do? So again, in this case, what we're looking at is we're looking at the gender differences without looking at leaders and equals. So we take the male subjects that were in the leader position, take the male subjects that were in the equal position, and we just combine them. And we take the female subjects in the leader position, we take the female subjects in the equal position, and we just combine those as well, and we calculate the expectations of sexual interest for these particular levels. So any predictions on this? Bless you. Is one going to be higher than the other? If so, which one? Mm-hmm.
I think people would be equal.
Okay, and why is that?
So in high school, I didn't have a whole lot of classes I had to take, but I did have a whole lot of time at school because I didn't have a car.
Yep.
And so I used to TA a lot. me more, and I felt like maybe they were, trying to connect with me. I obviously didn't want to, but I felt that way more in my TA classes than I did when I was in the class with them, like, learning the same thing. And I'm not.
Okay, so you felt that same sort of effect of power.
Yeah.
So you would imagine that it should be the same for males and females, that females feel that power change as well. Okay. Any other possibilities? Yep.
I don't know if this is necessarily it, but I know a lot in society, I'm not sure about now, but at least at growing up, it was largely perceived that, or largely like said that most females probably weren't interested in a lot of men, but any men would be interested in almost any woman.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that females just perceive more sexual interest from men just because they think any man would be interested in them.
Okay. So it's quite possible that the female score here will be higher because the females are going to watch this video and they're going to be asked, would this person be interested in dating you? And they might say, well, yeah, he's a guy. Of course he's going to be interested in dating me. Right? So it could be that the females are actually going to have higher scores than the males. Any other possibilities? Anybody want to argue for males having higher expectations of sexual interest in females?
On that
Mhm.
same note, it could be that men could be higher just because they feel that they're entitled, they have that societal delusion that they're entitled
Okay.
to receiving more sexual interest than women.
All right, so they might have been socialized to feel like they are entitled to that. Mm-hmm.
I feel like females are more likely to be self-conscious and like think that people wouldn't be attracted to them or interested in them, so that might have an effect also.
Okay, so if women have been socialized to be more self-conscious, then in that case, it would almost be like that lower confidence level, right? So it's like, oh, is this person going to be interested in you? And it's like, well, I have such low confidence. Of course not, right? Why would they? Why would they be interested in me? So it could be that women have lower expectations of sexual interest. Yep.
I think it also could be possible for it to be higher than males because I think culturally, it's traditionally the male that like approaches a woman
Mm-hmm.
or starts a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if that's how males know how to start relationships, I think they would be more likely to say that person might want to date with me. Whereas
Mhm.
with female who I find as a female, I usually get approached more than I approach other people, just
Yep.
culturally.
So just statistically, you would imagine that the females would say, yeah, there are more expectations of sexual interest coming from the male in the video, just because that's the society that we live in. The initiation of sexual interest comes from the males most often. So those are all great suggestions, and that's just kind of giving you an example. That's the kind of critical thinking that you should be doing when you're reading your articles. So before you get to the results section, much like we're doing right here, before you get to the results section, you should think to yourself, what might happen in this situation? What is going to happen? Are females going to have higher expectations of sexual interest? Because males are more likely to initiate, the sexual interest. Or is it males going to have higher levels of sexual interest because they're more entitled, or females have lower self-esteem or more self-conscious, or there might not be any difference between the two, maybe because of this. So that's the kind of critical thinking that you want to do, try to guess what's going to happen. And that's one of the reasons I love studies like this, because occasionally in a study like this, you'll have good reasons why it could go any way. So we had very plausible explanations for why it should be higher in males. We had very plausible explanations for why it should be higher in females. We had very plausible explanation for why it should be the same. What's it going to be? Well, as it turns out, they're actually the same. So there actually is no difference in terms of the expectations of sexual interest. That is that p-value I was talking to you before about. That means that the difference that they found was most likely due to chance. It was most likely a random difference. And you'll notice that I don't have numbers here, and that is because the results section that they wrote was not friendly enough for me to find those numbers easily. And do you remember how when we were writing our results section, I said, let's put in the means every single time we report something. So when we say, for correct items, singles, mean of 40, recall fewer items than pairs, mean of 70, then groups of 3, mean of 80. They didn't do that here. So they gave me the stats, so I know, and they gave me the explanation that there's no difference. They weren't friendly, that's why we got no numbers here. I don't think we got numbers for the interaction either. But we know that there was no main effect, so there was no difference. So surprise, surprise. All right, interaction. Does power interact with subject sex? So we've seen that there is an effect of leadership, that going from equals to leadership increases your expectation of sexual interest. So we want to know if power affects males differently than it does females. And basically what we're saying is, we know that power here increases your expectation of sexual interest. Your expectation of sexual interest goes higher when you become a leader. The question is the difference between equals and leaders bigger for males than it is for females, or is the difference between equals and leaders bigger for females than it is for males? If either of those is true, we have an interaction. If neither of those is true, if the difference between equals and leaders is the same for males as it is for females, then we have no interaction. So another way of saying that is, if somebody asks you, what's the size of the effect in terms of expectation of sexual interest going from equals to a leadership position, what's the size of that effect? If you have to ask them, well, it depends. Are you talking about males or are you talking about females? If it depends, that's an interaction. If it doesn't depend, then we have no interaction. So what do we think is going to happen? What do we think is going to be the outcome? Is there an interaction? Is there no interaction? And if so, why is that the case? It's a little bit hard to maybe visualize some of these. All right, let me give you an example of what I mean. All right, let's say that guys, let's say that expectation of sexual interest has to do with confidence, right? Let's say that that's what's going on with expectations of sexual interest. It all has to do with confidence. When you're an equal, you're not very confident. When you're a leader, you're much more confident. This is one of the possibilities for the interaction. All right? We have equals here. We got power here. And then we have expectations of sexual interest. It's quite possible that males start off with higher confidence than females do. Right? It's quite possible that they just walk in and they have more confidence. So when they're in the equals position, they might have that level of confidence. I'm going to use for males. All right? They might have that level of confidence when they come in. When they're put into a leadership position, their confidence might increase. Right? We saw that in general, confidence increased going from equals to power. So that might be the effect of going from equals to power for males. We could get an interaction without any difference between males and females for the main effect if women came in with lower confidence, so that when they were placed into an equals position, they had lower confidence than they did prior. But what if giving them a position of power, a leadership position, just massively boosted their confidence? What if they were like, well, this is something I've never experienced before. I'm being put in a position of leadership. Oh my goodness, I must be doing something great. I have much, much more confidence. This is an interaction. The expectation of sexual interest changes more for females than it does for males. But notice the average level for males and the average level for females, exactly the same. So no main effect between males and females. No higher expectations of sexual interest for males or females. But it's quite possible that females experience a greater boost in expectations of sexual interest from the leadership position than males do. On the other hand, it's entirely possible that the opposite occurs. It's also entirely possible that there's no main effect. So in that case, what would happen is you would have equals, you would have power, you would have expectations of sexual interest, you would have males, and females basically on the same line, so that there's no interaction, that the same boost in expectations of sexual interest that you get from going to equals to power position occurs the same amount for males as it does for females. Those are the possibilities. Either we have an interaction or we don't have an interaction. So what do people think? Any speculations? Does power affect males more? Does power affect females more? Or is power power? And people are people, and it affects both in exactly the same way. Mm-hmm.
I would think that just based on what I've seen in like the news, power affects males more than it would females, just because there's been more cases of males sexually harassing females than the other way around.
Okay, so one possibility is that, actually the one that we got right there, maybe power affects males more than it affects females. And that would explain the preponderance of males in the Me Too movement that got reported. So I remember flipping through a gallery of like 75 individuals that were outed during the Me Too movement, and I found 2 women. You know, so maybe it is that power affects males much more than it does females. Anybody want to argue for the opposite or for the no interaction effect? Mm-hmm.
No,
Possibly no.
just because there are less females in power. You said you noticed that
Mm-hmm.
there are less females in power, so you can't really see them interacting. Just
Mhm.
because you have that difference there.
Yeah. So there's fewer females in power in popular culture as well. So if I flip through a gallery of 75 directors in Hollywood, I would probably only come across 2 females as well. I'd probably come across Catherine Bigelow and Patty Jenkins, and that's about it. So it could be that power affects them equally, and the reason that we have so many males being reported is because there's just more males in power. Mhm.
I feel like kind of going off what she said, like females kind of take power differently too.
Okay, how so?
I don't really know an example right now, but they kind of like I don't know how to explain it.
Okay, so you're saying that there should be an interaction because females take power differently? Okay, so yeah, that's a possibility. Sometimes we have these gut feelings and we don't really know what it's going to come out as or what the mechanism might be. But anyways, once again, very interesting question because we have a number of different possibilities, right? We have a number of different, yes, there might be an interaction, no, there might not be an interaction. What was the actual case? It turns out that there was no interaction. There was no evidence of an interaction. Power affected the male subjects the same amount and in the same direction as female subjects. So males were not more, did not have different expectations of sexual interest than females did. That came out in the main effect. And what's more, power did not affect males differently than power affected females. So the conclusions that biases in expectations of sexual interest arise from power inequalities, and men in general do not have higher expectations of sexual interest from female counterparts, and power affects males and females equally. So what does this mean in terms of, let's flex our critical thinking skills. What does this mean in terms of society as we move towards more equality across the genders? Mm-hmm.
Matt, I guess there would be more cases of men reporting women sexual harassment, that it's just gonna increase on the side of women as women become more in power roles.
Exactly. So what this says is that it's not a gender thing. And what's more, it doesn't even interact with gender. It's a power thing. So one of the things that, speaking of power things, one of the things that came out very recently, and this was from the APA, was a report on toxic masculinity. So do people remember that? It was about a year ago. They put out that report on toxic masculinity, and Gillette made that famous commercial, and people either lost their minds one way or the other way, going the other direction. One of the things that kind of led to such a huge reaction towards the ideas of toxic masculinity is the fact that it kind of blended and fit right into the narrative of the Me Too movement. It fit right into the fact that there was a wide preponderance of male predators. So of course, the cause, and this is how correlation works in your mind, people jump to conclusions. Of course, the cause had to be something about being male. There was way more males than females, so the cause had to be something about being male. That's what we should tackle. We should tackle things like toxic masculinity. Studies like this then indicate that that is not the case. It makes intuitive sense, but the psychological reality is that's not the case. It's a power differential. So Weinstein and Spacey allegedly harassed their subordinates because of that power position. Asia Argento allegedly raped a child, statutory raped a child, because of that power difference. And as that occurs more and more, it's not an actual male thing or a male cause. So if we're looking to reduce sexual harassment, like we should be as just generally good people, it's not, the causes are not anything in how males are socialized, it's not anything in our sort of culture, it's not anything in the sort of toxic masculinity locker room culture where we should be looking at. And I'm not endorsing that. Those are problems that cause other problems. But if you're focusing on sexual harassment, that is not the place to focus it on. It's not on any sort of toxic masculinity. It's on the toxic effects of power and how they change your perception of the people that you are looking at. Mm-hmm. There's a question, comment? No? Okay. Hand that was stretching. All right, so any final comments, questions about this study here and the sort of analysis of interactions and main effects? Okay.